Hello, Steve Westman, the Audiophile Roundtable. Title today, or topic today, are vinyl records really that expensive? George Borden, welcome to the show, the Roundtable Wednesday midweek. How are you?
Doing great, Steve. How you doing?
I'm excited for this one. I think we got a lot going on today. It's going to be a fun episode.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I should start with I guess I'll do this. I'll start with some of the news, some of the releases today. We can go through some of that. Tell me what you think. I mean, we'll start with MoFi. This is now ready to ship. This is the Ruth Brown Rock and Roll 180 gram mono LP. It's $40 US. I think it's 2,000 copies, numbered copies. The dynamic sound of Miss Rhythm and the singer that helped build an iconic label. Ruth Brown's rock and roll bristles with electrifying emotion, vocal power, and R&B filled energy. So it's a 1/4 inch, 15 IPS to DSD 256 to the analog console to the lathe. You buying it?
I don't think I'm gonna buy it right now, but it's at the last minute I always get the fever. As soon as I see the first review and someone's raving about it, I go, man, and then FOMO. But maybe not. I don't know.
2,000 copies. I mean, it's back during the FOMO phase, right? When you saw this go up,
yeah,
and you saw it 2,000 copies. Guess what would happen? That same day, it would just be sold. So definitely not anymore. People are not as.
The price is right though. Look at that price.
Not that they're not excited. I just think you just wait, right? It's not the same. Here's another one that MoFi is releasing. This is just what came out of nowhere because I don't think anyone thought this was happening. This is the Bruce Springsteen, The Wild, The Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. $100, super vinyl, 33 RPM.
One step. For
what do you think?
$100, huh?
And so it's got the skin. Obviously, have the skinny packaging as well here.
Yeah, as far as Springsteen goes, I give all credit to Bruce Springsteen for being a great American songwriter and a great American performer. But his music never really hit me. I do have, probably 3 or 4 different Bruce Springsteen records, and I have them for historical purposes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would be seeking out a Bruce Springsteen, especially an earlier record, for its fidelity.
And that's always been the big thing because Springsteen was always that FM sound, pretty much engineered and produced for the FM radio market of its day, right? I mean, I've got the Springsteen box set that has the plangent process. I think that probably is the best sounding albums you can get for Springsteen. I mean, I got a few originals as well. That the original Born in the USA definitely doesn't sound that great. The fidelity on that one, it sounds definitely, I want to say muffled and sounds just very FM radio. That's what I want to say.
Of it as kind of a slick, thin record that was very of its time, and the river. But I'll say this though, my favorite Bruce Springsteen record by far is Nebraska,
and I have that on Vinyl Me Please as well. And
I have an OG of it. It sounds amazing, and not for fidelity, but for the grungy quality of it and that sort of stifled, claustrophobic feeling matches the content.
I like the way you describe that. I mean, it's very haunting in itself. Yeah. It has a story to it as well. And Bruce Springsteen recorded that on a cassette tape. He bought it. I think it was a teak recorder way back when.
It was TAC 4 tracks that everybody had back then, I think.
Probably there he goes. Recorded that on a cassette, and then they cut it to vinyl from that. So, yeah.
But it's not every record is supposed to sound like, Pretzel Logic.
Which pretzel? What are you talking? I thought I banned Steely Dan on this channel. Didn't we have that discussion?
I was only referring to them for the high quality of recording.
Okay, cool. I thought I did. Look at this. I took the ban off of Little Feat too.
There it is. Look at that.
I love that album. That's a great live album.
I have that record.
So today we're going to talk about, is vinyl records, are they really that expensive? And we'll compare them to maybe what prices were 50 years ago. I've got more news though. I was going through the Acoustic Sounds website. They have their top 10. And I want to go through those with you right now. We'll start from 10 and go all the way up. How would we do that? So number 10, this is one that's on my list. Alice Cooper's "Welcome to My Nightmare," Atlantic 75, 45 RPM. I've heard a lot of really good reviews and great reviews about how well that record sounds. Number 10 is the Verve Acoustic Sound Series. It's the Ben Webster Quintet, Soulville. Heard some great things about that record as well. Who doesn't like Otis Redding, the Dock of the Bay, Atlantic 75, 45 RPM. That was his very last song he ever recorded before he got he died in I think it was a plane crash.
Plane crash, yeah. And mysteriously, that is my least favorite Otis Redding record, and I have everything up to that. But and it's just because the early stuff drives me crazy.
They were mixing that song the day he passed, which is sad. Asia, Steely Dan, of course, number 7. Oh, I missed it here, but number 6, we've got Matchbox 20, Yourself or Someone Like You. That great album. I remember having the CD back in the day in the 90s. I mean, it was a big radio played record. I mean, it's one of those greatest hits records, right? Every song you sort of recognize. I'm looking like Kevin Gray's War Greatest Hits. Oh, that's not actually Kevin Gray's. It's Analog Productions 45 RPM version. So I don't know who cut that one. I don't want to assume, but I bet you it was probably Ryan Smith. If anyone knows in the comments, put it in. Genesis selling England by the pound, and then the top 3 here we've got Hootie and the Blowfish. I have that CD. I also have the 33 RPM. I guess it's the colored vinyl that came out. It's for the Atlantic 75 series, but the 33 RPM. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. They're self-titled, and John Coltrane ballads. There you go. Huge.
With this list, that as I'm looking at this, I just want to kind of everybody to just go back a little ways into the past.
Hold on. How far?
At the announcement of these records and this series. And I want everybody to remember the loudest voices were complaining.
About what?
And talking about how who needs any more of these? Like, who cares about Foreigner? Who cares about Crosby, Stills, and Nash? Who cares about Matchbox 20? These are all common records. We need new stuff that nobody's pressed before. And look at the ones that have been really taken off out of there. The Phil Collins, the Bad Companies, Matchbox 20, Hootie and the Blowfish. All these records that when this was announced, I remember listening to the majority of people complaining about the titles, and just let's remember that our little group here of all of these people is very small. There's a lot of other people out there that don't come on these, channels
or watch or hear about it,
or do any of this, and they just buy records because they're records that they loved when they were growing up. They're getting back into vinyl. The reason vinyl's taking off is not because of all of us. We were already here. Mm-hmm. It's all these new people that are coming in, and they're trying to rebuild record collections, and they want really good pressings of these records that they loved when they were teenagers or in college or whatever it was. Let's just remember the business end of it and
I think for us as consumers, I mean, we're not thinking the business end of this. If you're a Acoustic Sounds, if you're a Mobile Fidelity, if you're a Rhino, if you're an Impex, right? I mean, there's a lot that goes into this, and then that leads me into Impex as well. George, have a look at this. Impex is coming out with a Stan Getz and Gilberto limited numbered edition. This is their one step, so this would be the same. I would assume the same material used for the MoFi one steps as well. I think there's a little bit of here we go. So the Pressed RTR and the VR 900 Super Vinyl, mastered from the original analog master tapes by Bernie Grunman, limited to 7,500.
Includes an alternate mono 7-inch
and a 36-page booklet and a striking outer slipcase. So guess what? Impex, A.B. Fong and her team in the next week or two will be coming on the roundtable for a chat about Impex and the release of this album, plus much, much more. So I just got an email from her last night, and we're just going to be working out some dates. So hopefully we'll get a date. I'll put that up, and we'll be excited to have the whole team on. So it should be interesting.
Again, I think it's a fabulous record. I have 2 copies myself. And I love it. I love that record. I think that I'm expecting some people will kind of go, really, another one? We just had it, again. But I'm all for it.
I've got the acoustic sounds version. I think it's great.
I do too, and I have an OG. And if you want to hear some saxophone that sounds like it's sitting right in your living room, being played right in front of you, that record will do it for you right there.
So on the super vinyl, I think that's going to be very, very fascinating. And that would be 45 RPM too, I would assume. So, I mean, that's going to be awesome. I'm excited about it. Yeah. And then, more news. So Rhino High-Fidelity, you've heard about this record, right? Marquee Moon by Television. You heard of that one?
I think so.
I was talking to my friends at Rhino. They're just under 300 left on the Marquee Moon out of the 5,000. So if you haven't grabbed a copy, that will, I would assume, be sold out within the next month or so. They're just under 300.
Go get them, folks. Go get them.
Great album. Come on. Maybe they'll do more Television. Maybe it would Adventure or something like that. That'd be cool to get.
I hope.
We'll see. So if you haven't already, guys, we're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcast. There's the show.
Number 1 in Ecuador. Number 1 in Ecuador.
We're still number 1 in Ecuador. The Audiophile Roundtable with Steve Westman. Number 1 in Ecuador. We've got friends in Ecuador. It's great. Amazing. And of course, I'd like to thank purefidelity.ca, Pure Fidelity turntables. There they are there, guys. I'm excited. I have one. Have a look at their website.
You're getting the pre too with it? You're getting the pre? Are you getting everything on that page?
Everything there is the one that they're making for me to basically listen to. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Sweet.
I'll have to compare it to my because this is my setup here, right? Got the Rega P6, the Enia MC cart, MK5 illicit amp, MK4 phono stage. So I mean, that sounds pretty sweet. I'm really, really happy with my setup. So it'd be an interesting comparison.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I do this thing here. A lot of viewers know it, right? This is the things that make you go, I got a couple cool things. I know you're a real big fan of Slapshot. I mean, I know you aren't Canadian, but you're still a big fan of Slapshot. So I thought I'd go back to the whole Slapshot thing starring Paul Newman. And there's Paul Newman there. He was Reg Dunlop, of course, player coach of the Charleston Chiefs. Now, what's really crazy about this, George Roy was the director of this movie, and he actually at first did not cast Mr. Newman. The first choice was, and this would be weird, so wrap your head around this one. If it wasn't Paul Newman, it would have been Al Pacino. Here's the thing. George Roy Hill decided not to go with Al Pacino due to the fact that Al Pacino could not skate.
Well, I've heard that.
And if you watch Paul Newman skate, I mean, he skates damn good for a guy that, lives in the States and probably never grew up playing hockey like I did. But there was other choices, too, that they almost made. So Richard Gere, they looked at Richard Gere as being Reg Dunlop, but he couldn't skate. And Kurt Russell possibly could have been Reg Dunlop, but couldn't skate, which is pretty funny because one of his sons is actually was a professional hockey player at one time, and I think he started in one of these Marvel movies. If I'm not, I don't know if he's a Captain America Takeoff or whatever. I don't watch that stuff, but yeah.
Well, a little known fact, Steve, is that I know how to skate, and I got signed to a movie about ice hockey with Jason Bateman back in the day because I could skate and act as well. So there are junior hockey leagues here, and we do have some NHL teams here in America. So it's not completely like we're boys.
But it was 1988 when that all happened, and when Gretzky got traded from the Edmonton Oilers to the LA Kings. That's when hockey started to get really large in the California area. Before that, no one could give a crap. It was all hockey. It was all baseball and football before that.
True that, but I'll tell you, I learned how to ice skate back in like 1974 when I was just a little kid. There was an ice rink right over at the mall.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it was few and far between, but there was a little bit.
So my last things that make you go home. So remember Paul? Well, we know Paul McCartney. Do you remember a little movie that he did? He wrote and directed. It was quite a bomb. Do you remember the name of that?
Slapshot.
That wasn't Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney did "Give My Regards to Broad Street." Remember
Yeah, I
that?
try to never say that out loud.
I remember watching this kid going, "What am I watching here?" He wrote and directed it. I mean, the screenplay was just, he writes better songs than he does movies. But here's a thing that a lot of people didn't know: "No More Lonely Nights," the song, which was the last song they recorded for the movie. He tried to get a song. He tried to get a title like "Give My Regards to Broad Street" for a song, but couldn't figure it out. So he was left with this one here, "No More Lonely Nights." But what's cool about it, the song features David Gilmour from Pink Floyd on guitars. He's included in the soaring solos and fills throughout the song. Things that make you go, David Gilmour is the guitar in "No More Lonely Nights."
Well, the Lonely Nights were at the movie theater when that movie was playing at them.
That's it.
Nobody there.
Look at that. Things that make you go, I did it. That was a lot of education today, I thought. I know your mind's just blown by that. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And Dave Gilmour also went on to play on Flowers in the Dirt too. At least a couple songs.
And I was reading there. He also his appearance fee or whatever he charged for that song, he had it donated to charity. I mean, obviously the guy doesn't need
it would be I think you'd feel guilty taking money for that.
Like, why would I take money for that? But yeah, Dave Gilmour, that's kind of cool. It's too bad that, Paul McCartney and Gilmour didn't do more collaboration. That would be quite interesting to see what would happen there.
Calm down, Norman. Oh, by the way, Dave Gilmour and I think it's Ian Pace and Paul McCartney played the Cavern too, I think, as a band. Yeah.
Oh, Norman said I didn't know that. I didn't copy him. I didn't know that he said that.
Your videos, Mazzy.
So I thought that was really interesting. So that was my things that make. But Norman, he didn't have anything about Slapshot. So there you go. How would I know? But yeah.
Yeah, where's the Slapshot Dave Gilmour connection, Mazzy? Come on, man. You're gonna have to up your game.
But also too, I was reading about Slapshot. In terms of a sports movie, probably the best sports movie that's ever been made, because it's very authentic in terms of the times, the people, what was going on in society, the political aspect, the closing of mills, the small towns, all that stuff. I mean, it has a lot in it. It's not just hockey as well, but it's again something. Who and if you know the movie, who owns the Chiefs? Owns. I mean, yeah, there you go.
So many great ones.
I mean, the goalie's name was Denis Lemieux, if you remember Denis Lemieux. So yeah, there you go. So I want to see what we have. I want to get into this, so I know. I don't want to see that. I don't know what we're doing with that. I want to get into some, we're here to talk about our vinyl prices really that expensive any longer. You brought a couple of charts. You want to start this, but I do want to start with this. Have a look at this. I mean, we all talk about inflation and what causes inflation, right? It's when production costs rise and the producers pass the increases on to us consumers or customers. And then demand pull inflation, when demand for goods increases and exceeds production capacity. So that's pretty much what causes inflation. So we've seen that over a number of years now, and is that reflected in the cost of vinyl? Let you take the floor. I know we're going to go with this. So go.
Well, one of the things that I was looking at, we were having this discussion the other day, and I started looking at some charts and using an inflation calculator because you hear people talking about, well, if you're going to spend $30 on a record, it better be darn well worth it. Well, I mean, when you were spending $6 on a record in 1974. Which you were $5.97, I think anywhere $5.99, $5.97. They had weird numbers back then. It was the equivalent. It's very similar. So what I was noticing also is that the price of a Big Mac in terms of, beyond inflation is increased by 30% on top of the inflation. So food right now is way more expensive than it used to be as compared to records. And I was noticing this too, because when I go to the grocery store and I buy 2 bags of groceries, it's like $85 where it used to be, $35.
It's definitely, I mean, not even having to look at charts. I can tell you from a family of 5 here in my house, in the last 4 years, I've seen the same stuff we're buying. It's doubled in value. So I can't walk into a Costco any longer and spend $300 or spending $600. I mean, that's pretty much what happens now.
Yeah. And so what I wanted to look at was, okay, 50, let's just go round it off at 50 years. It's 2024. Let's look at 1974. And I saw that the average price of a new LP what, $5.90 something, and I think I gave you a chart that showed what $5.99 was in today's money, and it was like $30 or something.
And so what I asked you to do, because a lot of people buy the UHQRs and we're looking at, where you're talking about the Atlantic 75, we're doing a reverse. So I'm going
Yeah.
to put the first one up. I've got the UHQR. Maybe we can talk about this. So what are we seeing here?
So what we're seeing here is that if you took $150 and you paid for a UHQR in today's money for $150, it was the equivalent of spending $22 back in January of 1974, which I think that when you look at the packaging and all the stuff that comes along that some people think is superfluous, or even just the high quality records, because look, if you peel back the box, you peel back the packaging, and you peel back the stout and jacket, and you just get to the quality of the record that's inside there, and you compare it to the quality of your standard beat up OG record or whatever, I think most people agree that there is a pretty noticeable jump in the quality of a lot of those records. Some not. Some people, don't like some of them, but most of them, yes. And I don't think that paying, for a fidelity freak back then to drop $22 on a, expensive record, because I think like even the UHQRs and stuff that started coming out towards the end of the 70s, or at least the MoFi ones, were in that price range, 20 something, 30 something dollars. I
think there were 50 back then.
Even okay, so there you go. I mean, that's outrageous. I have a stack of MoFis that I just bought for less than $30 each today. So
look at this. So I think there were 50. Someone in the comments, correct me if you guys actually bought one back then. But look at this. I mean, I have this UHQR here. So tell us about this one. This is the UHQR. We compared it to today's dollar value compared to January 74. I mean, it's $22.66. And then, I don't know, that's amazing.
And so let's look at it this way. $22 back then would have been 4 times the price of what at least 4 times the price of what a regular record was. And at this point, at $150, and we're paying $35 for new records these days, you're right in the same place.
Here you go, Jefferson. He says the black box was 50, so I was correct in saying that. So that being said, then, I mean, really, this is a pretty good bargain now at $150.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, is that what this is? Is this what this chart's telling us?
I think what it's saying is, I don't know if I would say that it's a bargain, but what I would say is that it is not outrageous compared to what it always has been this way. I think what's happening is that a lot of people that are coming into it, and I'm not trying to discredit that, but people that are new to this idea of looking at these pressings and going for high fidelity records, or trying to seek out better than the average record that you'd buy in the store. This has always been the case. There was a lot less hi-fi freaks back in the 70s because it was uber expensive to get, really high quality, stereos back then as well. So this is not a new thing. This isn't something that's happening now that is contrary to anything that ever happened in the past. And to be honest with you, by 1978, records had reached a ridiculous high. The difference in price at the $5 to $6 price point was up to $8 by like 1978, based on the idea that 77 was a massive year with Rumors. And then before that, you had Hotel California. You had that big corporate vibe.
How about this? We talked about this. I mean, the Bee Gees made a ton of money as well. They sold a lot of records. Saturday Night Fever, Staying Alive, and it was in the 80s. But I mean, there's a lot of records being sold in that time period. That's for sure.
Two of the big selling records of 1978 would be Saturday Night Fever and Grease, both of which.
That's right, Grease as well.
Barry Gibb had a hand in both of those records, and they were both doubles.
Yeah.
Right. So that that was a massive amount.
I think every one of my friends' parents had a turntable that had that record. So I mean, it's probably one of the most produced soundtrack, or one of the most pressed soundtracks ever out there. That's for sure.
And if you think about the infrastructure for making records, meaning the plants, the actual companies owning plants, multiple plants, the distribution, avenues, and the trucks, and everything's in place, and the record stores to pump the records out. It was cheaper than ever, more cost effective to make a million of records, which would be extremely expensive now. But back then they had it down to a science, and that was what they were pumping out like crazy.
So when they made so many records, I mean, I know, the whole hot stamper thing, right? Obviously, if you're pumping out a million records, some on the tail end aren't going to sound as good as the ones at the beginning that are pressed as well. So I understand that aspect of the hot stamper. You probably don't want something that was pressed in the millionth pressing compared to something that's pressed at 100,000, right?
Well, right, but they're going to they're going to make a lot of metal parts, and the objective was, the goal was, change it out after 1,000, right? Not just wait till it breaks.
Do you think they actually did that though? Is what I'm trying to say.
I'm pretty sure that they did in the UK. I think they, or European countries, I think, had a lot more, and always kind of have. I think America's always had some, I don't know, let's just say, liquid standards in terms of what was written on the paper.
I wonder, like the Beatles' Capitol records, if they sort of went over the amount they should be using for that stamp. Or we'll just get another 200 or 300 in. Come on, we can do it. I mean, who knows? We don't know.
Yeah, it would all be, conjecture, and it would all just be, theories. But to be honest with you, we're buying records right now. We're old records. Those Capitol records right now are fetching a pretty penny, and nobody's sitting there able to even know if it was the 1800th off of a stamper or the first one. There's a lot of variables, but people are still paying a lot of money for those original Beatle Capitol records, which is kind of mind blowing to me in some ways.
I don't know about recycled content. I have no idea what's going on. This is George and I putting together something. So, anyways, no idea.
I have no idea.
We're having fun. I mean,
yeah. Sorry, I didn't see that.
Well, if someone's saying this is all recycled contact, they've already taken Ron Beaudry to task over this. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. About what? About talking about the cost of records? I don't know. I don't know.
It's more than that. It's okay.
Anyway, so I hope that what they were talking about was that records are not as expensive compared to what everything else is, in line with the cost of everything else that's out there. Records are pretty much where they've always been. Let's also remember, it's entertainment. It's considered a luxury. It's not a necessity. You don't have to buy something.
Let me stop you there, and that's the big thing. So we've seen, I mean, if anyone has owned a house in the past 10 or 15 years, they have to understand their house has also doubled in value as well. Not that you're feeling any richer, but when things go up in value, and this is what I want to show everyone as well, just so you have a better idea of, have a look at this. This is an important chart. This is basically the Dow Jones Industrial Average from 2014. It was at 15,000, and now we're just under 40,000. Okay, so that's in a 10-year period. We've seen the Dow Jones Industrial Average up. What would that be? 30,000 points, right? In 10 years. I mean, when I was in the stock market industry, we were having a big party because the Dow Jones in 1995 hit 5,000 on the index, and now it's at 40,000 in 2024. So you're seeing it go up like this, like you can see this here, right? I mean, this is crazy that things are going up this much. I mean, this is back in 2014. The Dow Jones is only at 10,000. So 2014 is at 10,000. 2024, that's why I wanted to put that up, is at 40,000. So you're seeing those things go up. Everything else that we want to buy will go up. That is just what's going to happen. Food prices, car prices, gas prices, records, hi-fi, you name it. Stock market goes up, everything else goes up. That's the economy growing and growing because population increases, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's not going to come back down. Absolutely. Warren Buffett, I mean, the major investment guru, when he passes his way, his estate will not have Berkshire Hathaway stock. It'll be the S&P 500 index. That's where he says put your money. It just grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, and I'm noticing some of the commentary in the chat, and the idea was only to point out that the cost of records right now is in relation to everything else where it's always been, if not even slightly better. And I think that one of the reasons that this comes up all the time is because we do have these manufacturers right now. It's more common now than it was back then to put out these super duper, versions, high fidelity, awesome packaging, extra booklet, containers, all this kind of stuff, trying to sort of take an all-time classic record and put it into what should be, you would hope, the be all end all of this record. And everybody kind of goes, I ain't spending, for $150, I ain't spending $150 on anything. And that's fair enough. I think what's interesting now that we were also looking at is the 75th. The 75th anniversary of Atlantic. Those records are at the $60 price point.
Well, have a look. There it is.
Yeah, which is the equivalent of basically a double album,
45 RPM
in the 70s. But that's the other thing too, is that these are single albums kind of being made into doubles and quads because of the high resolution, but there are 2 discs in there and it does cost more to manufacture.
So look at that. But look at that though. So the folks know that's $9 and less than $10 for an Atlantic 75, 45 RPM cut by Grunman, Brian K. Smith, Bellman, Kevin Gray, you name it. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because I think what happens is when we're sitting here talking about it like this, it makes it sound like we're defending, something like acoustic sounds, or we're defending the need to press records like that. And that's not really what this is about. It's really just sort of kind of like there's a conversation that keeps happening over and over and over again. And it's almost like it's unnecessary to have, because it's not something new. It's something that's always been the case. These are right where they need to be. I personally have not bought a single Atlantic 75th anniversary 245 record, period.
Is that a personal choice, budget choice? What is that about?
I just haven't felt the need to buy one, because for me, I want to hear it, but I'm not going to listen to it very much. For instance, Bad Company for me is something that I might listen to once a year.
Mm-hmm.
I already have a nice, clean OG that sounds good. And would I love to hear that, that first Bad Company record brought to the fore as well as it could possibly sound? I would, once. And so therefore, it doesn't make sense for me to buy it. There's a couple of records that have come up on there, and I thought about it. I thought about it pretty hard, but I've gone to great lengths already to seek out original copies of records, and it's not. I don't think that I don't think that they sound better than my originals. I have a feeling that it would sound better if I bought the Atlantic, but I've spent so much time and effort and money buying all of these original records for the past 40 years that it just wasn't something that, that mattered to me to have a better copy than the one that I need. And so I have been doing that. Every time a new one comes out, I go, let me go back. And if I hear something about the one that I have now that bothers me when I listen to it, then I will buy that one. I was down for Foreigner 4. Not because I think it's a great album, but I have some problems with the copy that I have. Not just the music. I know everybody will go, "What's the music? It sucks." No, it doesn't. It's a great record. But I just haven't felt the need to replace any of the records that I have. And that's where I'm at right now, is that I'm not looking to have multiple copies of Foreigner 4. I'm just looking to have a copy that if I decide I want to listen to it, or Bad Company, or Aretha Franklin, or, Trick of the Tail, or whatever, just any, I don't even know if Trick of the Tail's on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Insert your favorite Atlantic record here. If I feel a need to replace the one that I have as they come out, then I'll grab one. So far, that hasn't happened.
So speaking of original records, one that hasn't been reissued or repressed, and there's big demand for one artist is Tracy Chapman. I've talked about this before, but I got more information. So this is Crossroads. This is a DMM cut at Sterling Sound by Robert Ludwig. This is her follow-up album from the Tracy Chapman 1987, I think, or 88 self-titled. So DMM cut, mastered and cut by Robert Ludwig, guys. And this is an original. Now, what I did, and I want to do some research. I've got the self-titled here. Of course, this is also a DMM cut, master disc, 1988. So I went and I was talking to Michael Fremer yesterday, and I said, "Hey, nowhere on here does it say who mastered it, and it's DMM cut. And who do you think it is?" He goes, "More than likely, Bob Ludwig cut this album." And it doesn't say anywhere in the Dead Wax, anywhere in Discogs. It's a DMM cup, and the reason why it cut, and the reason why he says that is, Fremer said that, is because Greg, is it Calaby, wasn't around at this time, so it probably was Robert Ludwig who cut this Tracy Chapman self-titled at the DMM cup.
Yeah, and it's stinky digital too, isn't it?
It's all recorded digitally, again, but this is more than likely a Robert Ludwig cut. So I didn't know that.
And that was a joke. I love digital. I'm friends with digital.
There you go. And then another thing too, if you still want some deals, I know Andrew is on our program. 2016. This is the 2016, I guess, reissue of CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Cosmos Factory. It's got all the hits on it, right? I mean, Ramble Tamble, Before You Accuse Me, which Eric Clapton actually resung in his unplugged version of that concert years back. Traveling Band, of course, Run Through the Jungle. I heard it through the grapevine. Probably their best record. But here's it. This is my 2016. It's still readily available on Amazon, and this one was cut by Kevin Gray and mastered by Steve Hoffman. So it has Kevin Gray and Hoffman in the Dead Wax, 2016. It has to have this on it too. The Fantasy should say Fantasy 8402, 2016 Warner cut. It's what the label looks like. I can show you guys this as well. And it came in this crappy paper. I haven't changed it out yet, but there it is, the Fantasy label. Yep.
Here's mine. This is a old school.
There you go. So this would have been probably done at Acoustic years ago, I'd assume, right? When they used the plates from Acoustic for this one.
Yeah, this has got the little deep groove, there.
Yeah. So this was $39 or $40 Canadian, so it'd be like 32 US, and it's still readily available, or it was readily available on Amazon up until this show today. So yeah.
I think this was $5.99.
Does it? I don't know what he said.
Not today. It's not $5.
I don't know what he said. Does this one beat the OG? Are you asking the Cosmo Factory? I don't have the OG of Cosmo Factory. If that's the question, I don't have everything. But again, a Kevin Gray and Steve Hoffman mastered cut for $40, still readily available, brand new. Not bad. What's wrong with that?
I think the thing that's difficult about the Creedence, the originals, and I would have if I didn't have that.
You'd buy that one.
Is what I mean. I would buy that, and I would not hesitate. I would never go, what if? You know what I mean?
But I mean,
it's hard to find these old ones.
CCR is, I wouldn't consider a real big audiophile band. I mean, it's not like it's that, I mean, it's.
But there's a richness to it that can be lost if it's not handled properly. It's like there's the power of a rock band. There is the mixture of, how many bands, drums, bass, guitar, and singing? There thousands.
Yeah.
And they all are slightly different. Cream shouldn't sound like Creedence Clearwater, and shouldn't sound like Jimi Hendrix, shouldn't sound, and they all have their different blends, and the way that those blends worked is the way that that makes that band sound the way that they do. And there is something about those Creedence records. It's almost so simple. It's deceptively simple, sort of like AC/DC.
Right. Exactly.
And it's got to sound good, right? Yeah.
So someone, I think Eddie's album saying Acoustic Sounds has this on for 26 US right now. So pick it up. If it's a 2016, it will say Steve Hoffman and Kevin Gray in the Dead Wax. So this is my 2016. So absolutely.
And yes, New Station. I said arguably, like a lot of people say that's my favorite Creedence record. It's not necessarily the best Creedence. There's no yeah. We're
at 150 watching, guys. Hit that thumbs up. I've noticed every time people hit that thumbs up, it gets that crazy YouTube algorithm going. So please, it helps us out a ton. Thank you. And then going forward, I'm hoping as we get more thumbs up on these shows, I'll have a chance to do some more giveaways. Like I think I did just before Christmas time. I gave away. It was the Bill Evans album. I gave away to someone I think it was in Sweden, if I'm not mistaken. So pretty cool.
Yeah. For the record, I would just like to state that my favorite Creedence Clearwater record is Bayou Country.
I was just about to ask you that. Is exactly so. Yours is definitely okay. I also have the CCR Greatest Hits, which I want to think was also cut years back. Like the reissue was probably cut by Ludwig a few years back as well, which I think sounds pretty good from the digital domain.
Yeah, and again, I just wanted to make that clear is that if I did not have that in good shape, like meaning if I played that and it was bothering me, because a lot of those old Creedence records, they were beat up. They're hard to find. I mean, or they're easy to find, but they're hard to find.
Well, they were played a lot, right? I mean,
totally.
They were played a lot,
And if I would not hesitate to buy one of these reissues and listen to it and be perfectly happy with it.
Cranberry Sauce has got the 2002 Analog Productions Cosmo Factory, and he's got the 1980 MoFi. That'd be interesting. I've looked at that. Those are expensive still today if you look on Discogs.
Yeah, I think those were the ones that people really like, right? The Dylan ones, people call those out. The Creedence ones, maybe, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just reiterate. Yes, mastered, maybe not cut by Ludwig. So the ones mastered by Ludwig. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, talking to Fremer about the Tracy Chapman again. I was excited because for a long time I was like, who mastered this Tracy Chapman self-title? And he says more than likely it was Robert Ludwig. So there you go. I didn't know he did much DMM cutting either. I think Sterling had one of the only DMM lace back then, right? I mean, that was back in the late 80s.
Yeah, it's funny. I go back now and I start looking at. There's a lot of records in the 80s that I have that I just never even contemplated that were DMMs. That became a pretty popular thing. First, I think in Europe, it became almost.
Well, I had no idea about DMM. I mean, I bought I was 13 years old, 1986, and I bought and I have it behind me somewhere. The Paul Simon Graceland original it was a DMM cut as well. And to this day, I'll put it on my turntable. It sounds fantastic. I like it.
I didn't ever have a problem with the DMM. I think what happened also is that some people associated DMM for some reason with digital.
Okay.
It means direct metal mastering. The D stands for direct. It doesn't have anything to do with digital. I think some people have,
but they're using copper though. That's the big difference. It's it's a softer metal.
Yeah, you're cutting right into a piece of metal that essentially can be turned into, a stamper.
And John Loper's asked a good question. I've seen this on the Hoffman forums and people are, why do people not like DMM? I think they sound great. And the ones that I own, and I own the Tracy Chapmans, I mentioned. I mean, there's probably a lot. So I couldn't even tell you. I mean, Sterling Sound. I mean, in the late '80s had a DMM cutter, and they were doing a lot of DMMs. So I mean, I've never had an issue with any of my DMM cuts.
I think that sometimes and some mastering engineers will say, I don't like this or I don't like that. And they will be, vocal about it, but it's not always because of the sound. Sometimes it's because it's something that's more difficult to work with, or they're not geared up to deal with it, or they had experience with it and it didn't work for them. But yet there are people as well that learn how to do it, spend time with it, and figure out a way to make good sounding records. And there's all of these methods, all of these different techniques are all valid. And, it's been that way in the recording industry forever. It's the same way in the film industry. Certain techniques, certain people utilize, it works for them. They make good film or they make good records, and other techniques work for other people. As an engineer or an artist, you find out what works for you and you put that in your toolbox and you use it because it works for you, and you get rid of the things that don't. And there's a million reasons why they may or may not work. So
ViewQR is saying, like, from what I understand, it's harder to get deep bass on DMM due to the differences in copper or lacquer. I don't know how true that is now or ever was, though. He says, can you sort of? Talk about
Well,
that.
if you can cut the groove and the groove goes back and forth, 20 times a second, then 20 hertz will be produced. It's just that simple. If you make the cantilever go like this 20 times a second, then you are making 20 hertz. If it goes this way 1,000 times a second, you are making 1K. I think that some people get confused in the material that is being utilized but it's not really, that has no bearing on frequency. Literally, make the cantilever go like this 20 times in 1 second, and you have 20 hertz coming out of your speakers if your system's able to reproduce that.
Yeah. So you wanted to talk about, I had Roy Gandy on the program yesterday for a live Q&A.
Yeah.
Now I know, I don't know if it wasn't the elephant in the room, but a lot of viewers, and we've talked about this. You've got a couple of Regas. I got a P6. You have the Rega hum, and I did bring that up with Roy, and I know you wanted to talk about what he said in his explanation in my interview with him yesterday.
Yeah, and I didn't have the hum until I had a Rega cart. And he pointed out that when you are isolating the wines, you can put 4 walls around them.
That's right.
Building almost like a Faraday cage, and he found that the 4-walled situation brought down some of the fidelity. And so the trade-off being a 3-walled cage gave him better fidelity, but made it susceptible to hum on the inside of the disc. And so I noticed it. I didn't have it when I had other carts on. I did notice an increase in fidelity when I switched from an Audiophile Black to the Rega Exact, but then I noticed that hum. Now that hum doesn't bother me when the record's playing.
You don't hear it.
I don't hear it till it's on the it's on the dead wax, and I don't even hear it until I lift the needle off the record.
And sometimes I hear it when I lift the needle off, and sometimes I don't, though. It's not every single time. Has that happened to you?
Yeah, because interference, it's analog interference in the sense that it can be different every time. Just because you have a field here and something goes by it, it's not always going to be susceptible. It's just the way that it works. It's like if you run a signal up an analog console, it's theoretically different every time you do it. Might not be perceptible. But what I've noticed is that I don't really catch the hum until I actually walk over to the turntable and lift it off. Then it goes away and I go, there was something there.
I have this, that it'll hum for me, and I actually touch the candle, I touch the lever, and then it basically stops as well, or I touch, it come close to it. It's really weird the way mine hums, or it doesn't hum, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It's not a consistent thing for my system.
It makes me feel like it's also maybe static electricity that may or may not be already on the disc.
And that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking too for mine, anyways.
Yeah, because you're building up a charge, and then everything grows in value, right? And if it doesn't, then you may not notice it. But it's such a small thing, and it's one of those things where, for me, once it gets in there, I start obsessing about it, and I should just let it go. Because
that's an OCD problem, George. You better get some help for that.
Totally.
Michael Edwards, couple things. Yes, we've talked about the Impex Gets Gilberto that's coming out in March. I'm going to be having Abby Fong on with her team, Impex team, in the coming weeks as well, to talk about that record as well. It's a one-step, it's 45 RPM. I should have double checked before we went on here. I believe it's a 45. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Super vinyl, same formula I would assume that MoFi uses as well. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a killer. It has to be.
It's a fine record. It's a fine record.
There's not a lot of bad records out there. I mean, the Analog Productions one sounds great as well, right?
Yeah. Just to add before we move off of the Rega thing is that he wasn't trying to deny it. He was saying it's there, but it's just another trade-off.
Yeah.
That to get this, I'd sacrifice this, and So far, it hasn't been a big deal.
Well, I did mention to him too about, a listening room, how important a listening room is as well, right? I mean, he even admitted in his listening room, it's not, the most ideal listening room as well. So I mean, everyone's different. Everyone has there's variables in everything, right? Especially in the hi-fi gear world, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we have 60 hertz alternating current coming out of our walls, and it gets in everything. Even in recording studios where we have isolated power and clean power, sometimes we get radio stations coming in through the monitors. Sometimes we have, ground loop problems. Two pieces of equipment onto completely clean power can have a grounding problem between each other. When you start connecting things together and the source is 60 hertz, it's going to be there. It's called 60 cycle hum, and it's called 50 cycle hum in Europe
So,
because they use 50 cycle.
50. So Roy, I mean, in the end, from that conversation I had with him, I mean, he didn't really get. I mean, I thought he was going to say, "Oh, maybe we can do this to fix it," but he basically said, "No, that's what it is," and I guess deal with it. That's what I got out of that. I don't know.
Every manufacturer that makes gear, when they get down to the specifications, they're looking to hit certain targets. And in order to hit certain targets, in order to get certain aspects to come to fruition, you have to make sacrifices in other parts of circuits. And therefore, it's always a trade-off. And at the end of the day, it's a system, and you hope that the end result is what your target was.
Yeah.
And then the other things that are byproducts of hitting that target, sometimes they're not, you can't live with them. And so you have to then pull back a little bit till you can resolve that. Sometimes you go, you know what, that is okay in order to achieve this. And that,
I felt Roy was very humble. I mean, I think he's got a wonderful company, 50 years now, right? I mean, he's got great equipment for the price. I don't think you can get for the price, his amplifiers, which I run, and his, phono stage. And of course, they've got the P6 with the Ania MC card. You can't get a better quality for the price, better sounding for the price than that gear that I own and his equipment. That's how I feel. And it's funny too. I mean, I think for years his company has always competed with these $10,000 amplifiers, and Rega would come in with like a $3,000 amp or a $2,000 amp, and the hi-fi companies or the owners didn't want to sell that, right? Because it wasn't as expensive, so it didn't have that. I guess that not the fear of missing out, but that prestige to it, right? Oh my gosh, it's $10,000, so it has to sound better. That's not really what happens here.
Yeah, I mean, and there is just a point where you come to the realization that etched in that groove are frequencies and amplitudes, and those frequencies and those amplitudes can either be reproduced perfectly or something less than.
Yeah,
but never better. Never better than perfect.
Going back, Hurt Kamir one said he said his turntables have a hum and an end. He says it's acceptable ? Now again, sometimes mine has a hum, sometimes it doesn't. If I move closer to it, it might not. If I touch it after the record's while the record's playing, it doesn't. It's really weird the way mine hums.
The turntable doesn't have the hum. The carts that he makes are susceptible to the 60 cycle as it gets closer to the inside grooves because it's closer to the motor. And because of the way he chose to shield his windings by leaving one side open, that makes it susceptible to interference. It's the Rega carts that really have that susceptibility.
And I had a lot of viewers comment about the whole grounding thing, and I had other comments in my video as well.
Grounded.
After, I mean, it's grounded inside, and Roy did specify that while I talked to him as well. It's just not on the outside.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, when you ground the turntable, all you're really doing is connecting it to the chassis of your amplifier or your preamp or whatever it is you're sending it to. And the grounding wire doesn't have to be loose and free to be hooked to a grounding post, which is doing the same thing as internally grounding it inside the circuitry. Now, are the differences of how they work? Slightly, but it's all the same thing. You ground to ground.
John Loper made it. I want to go back here. He said he says here the Hagerman Labs, Steve, apparently can fix the hum. It fixes the hum.
He's
Yeah.
talking about a plate. Helps, but only decreased hum by 50% on my Rega P3. Now, Jay Hires 3053. You have a Rega cart on there, I'm assuming, or what's the cart?
And John Loper says that got rid of the hum. Here's Nick here at Steve. I run my RP6 with an Exact 2 and a Nia Pro, and I have never had a hum problem, he says.
We can tell by your picture there, Novice Nick, that you are running an Exact. It looks just like mine.
There you go.
There's an Exact sitting there running on a record. Look, I'll be honest with you. It took me 5 months until I noticed it. Okay. And to be honest with you, I had made some changes in some of the things that were plugged in and the way they were plugged in, and that could have even made it more perceptible. I also keep my turntable right on top of an integrated amplifier, and I keep the preamp right next to the power supply. There's a lot of things that I could do to separate things to try to lower the amount of interference that's going on, because it all does sum together. It hasn't been a big enough problem for me to even slide my preamp over by 3 inches to try to change that.
So Roy did say, and John Loper's just saying, Roy did say it's something to do with the power coming into the home. I mean,
that's the start of the whole thing. I mean, if you watch that Fremer video, he goes all the way outside of his house and goes to where the power line meets his house.
I saw that. I mean, I mean, I don't have the time in my life or anything to worry about that. I mean, it's at the, really just let's play our effing records and have some fun. I mean, it gets to a point. I mean, put me in the insane asylum if I get to that point. I mean, come on, I don't want to have to worry about this too much. It's basically, just let's play a record, plug and play, right? That's the big thing. Let's just do it.
Now, I've worked in a lot of really expensive studios that have, totally clean, isolated power and still have had grounding problems. It's something that can happen. Again, it happens with everything. There are ground lift buttons on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
When you hook a lot of things together, you never know.
So no, I really enjoyed talking. I thought he was just a very humble man. I really did. I mean, I really like his products. I own them and play them, and it's been wonderful.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, he has a theory, and he lives by his theory, and he seems to be doing okay with his theory. And there are people with other theories that do things differently, and that's why it's great to have choices. We have choices.
Yeah. I want everyone to hit that thumbs up button. We've got 140 people watching. Get that thumbs up. Come on, get it up. I'm going to start having contests as well. We're going to start giving away stuff in the near future. If we can get those thumbs up, it really does help the show. Rick V. Spinner also sold Rega back in the late 80s or late 70s, early 80s, said this: for those new Rega customers, Rega's tone arm sounds great. It's always been his favorite. What's he saying here? The Nagaco cartridge has always been his favorite cart for that tone arm, if anyone cares to know.
I had some great luck with 2 different Nagoya carts on my Rega tone arm. I used a 110 and I had a 200 as well. Both of those I've given away to lucky viewers or people.
Jefferson has special outlets for his audio tape machines that run straight to his box, and a Foreman power conditioner after that.
Yes. You can buy all kinds of power conditioning. A lot of them, when it comes to conditioning, are they cleaning it up? Yeah.
A little
regulating
bit.
Voltage. Yeah. Again, some people though, in the situation that they're in, they don't have the ability to do that stuff. And then you can get creative and start moving stuff around. It's a Google it up, and there's a bunch of cheap
I think for the Regas, it's a 2mm spacer you need for anything that's not a Rega cartridge. If you're going to basically use something other than the Rega brand cartridge, if I'm not mistaken on that stuff.
Actually, Ian from High Vinyl News actually took a microscope to an MP110 on a Rega tone arm, and it was within specs. Did not need the 2mm spacer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was in spec. The rake angle, I guess is what you call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or vertical tracking for the height of the arm coming down onto the thing. It was fine with the 110. But that's again, if you haven't watched it, it's a good view. He does put it through the little crosshairs and uses a camera that can do that sort of thing on a computer.
So I want to get back a couple things. I mean, we're already at the top of the hour. I'm running an hour on this show already. It's crazy. I've had viewers going, Steve, you got to go longer than that. So we'll go a little bit longer than an hour, unless you have to go. But getting back to like inexpensive records, and here's the thing too, the next 5 or 10 years, the baby boomers, our generation are 10 years older. I mean, pretty simple math. How do vinyl sales, stay or increase, or get to a level where the record companies like Acoustic Sounds will still be in business? Now, here's a chart, 2023. I mean, this is interesting. Top vinyl albums sold. I mean, Taylor Swift almost hit 1 million. Harry Styles, Olivia Rodrigo, Kendrick Lamar. You got Fleetwood Mac, number 5, Tyler the Creator, Taylor Swift again, Tyler the Creator again, Michael Jackson, the Beatles. Now, what do you see on this list that really open? Other than obviously some of the old '60s stuff, it's a lot of the newer artists are being bought on vinyl by some of the younger demographics. So and then I have another chart here that's interesting. Right? Who buys vinyl and what age? Right? So have a look at this, George. I mean, the 51 plus, I think that says, I can't even read this. I mean, I think it says 13%, but 35 to 50, another 14%. But look at this, 26 to 35. You got 25% buying vinyl, and 18 to 25, 26%. So there's a huge market for the younger generation that are half our age.
I think one thing that we always have to look at when we look at that and that age gap right there.
Well, look at that. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, but that doesn't count used records.
Good point.
And people that are 50 plus are usually having to go down and dig for used older records because that's where they started, right? They're trying to rebuild those collections. And I'm not saying that's good or bad or makes any difference about anything. I think another important thing to note is that none of them went over 1 million. That shows how sort of small, we still are in terms of there's not.
Well, Taylor Swift Midnights. My daughter bought Midnights for me, so yes, I do have a copy. 945,000. I don't have Harry Styles, Harry House 400. But look at the difference, eh? 945,000, and then Harry was number 2 at 480. Taylor almost doubled him in vinyl sales.
Yeah,
amazing. But I mean, it's cool, like the Beatles, Abbey Road. I mean, that came out in 1969 or whatever that was, and 160,000 units. I mean, still amazing.
Yeah, and it was remixed, right? They did the whole remix box set thing.
It doesn't say. I wonder if that's the remix, 160,000.
We'll see. Now that is the catalog.
No, it must be, has to be. That's the only one that's out there.
That's the only one in print anymore, right? Sure. I mean, that's another thing too.
But vinyl sales got a long ways to go. Have a look at this. So despite the comeback, vinyl is still far from its glory days. I know this chart's 2020, but look at this. 1973, the year I was born, record sales or vinyl sales were close to almost 300 million. It tapped out in just probably looks like just late 70s. We're almost at 350 million going into the 80s. And we see a decline, and we know what happened in the mid 80s with the CD, and almost like 1990. I mean, you almost don't even see anything there from 1990 until just around the 2010 era. And then it started climbing back up again. And we only sold in 2020 41 million units compared to 350 million units in the late 70s. I mean, it's a long ways from the glory days, that's for sure.
Yeah, and in the United States, that big year was 77. Right.
Well, you can see that. You can see that there, right? Look at that.
Yeah, and followed very closely by 78, and then you see the drop in 79, and there was a big backlash especially in America with the music that was popular.
Most of those records, and that would have been Staying Alive and the Bee Gees' Saturday Night Fever is probably the reason why that chart so high. Everyone owned a record player owned that record back in the day.
Yeah, disco and stuff, and the only record, and then, but you'll notice that in 80 it comes back up. You had another big influx of new music, Police and Pretenders and Talking Heads started getting bigger, and all that new sort of music that started coming into it, and it kind of built it back up. But then again, you can see that
one of the viewers mentioned cassettes. So obviously I didn't mention that, but yeah, definitely cassettes were a big issue too. I mean, even throughout the 80s, and I owned cassettes, but I mean, vinyl sales were pretty solid. Even in the mid 80s, here we're still looking at 200 million units, even with cassettes and the CD, basically on its way to where it became.
Yeah, and cassettes were around in the 70s, 8 tracks and cassettes, and it wasn't. I think you know, in the early 80s, yeah, you had when cassettes became primary was when you could take it with you anywhere with the Walkmans,
Yeah.
right?
Well, John's mentioning 300 million records, one record for every American. Well, back in 1970, there wasn't a 300 million population in the
Yeah,
United States. So, but
it
in
was more than
today's standard, but yeah, it would be way more than one per American back then. I mean, absolutely.
yeah.
Um,
But if you remember, you know, the cassettes, the 8 tracks, the cassettes, it was for the car. You
yep.
know, and a
Yep.
lot of the time what was happening is you were buying records and buying cassettes and making your own cassettes and that. But then what happened was that when you had the Walkman, and then you could actually walk around and go anywhere, and
Yep.
cassettes became
And
more.
that you and I are within this a couple of years of being the same age. I mean, yeah, I mean, I went from vinyl to cassettes. I had my vinyl records. I'd record them on my fancy and my fancy. We were talking about this. I found my first system here. This is what I had when I was 13, right there, the Sony system. So I would record my vinyl onto a cassette for the car when I was 16 years old. Good times. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Jazz Bum Chris is right. I mean, cassettes became the primary format for teenagers. Absolutely, that was my format, beginning in around 1980, 81, and then from there it was CD, and I still had my record collection, and and there was not a lot of records being made or pressed in the early 90s. That's for sure. You couldn't get anything.
Mastering for cassettes, well, the mastering would take place in a mastering studio like anything else in terms of whether there was going to be EQ and compression and topping and tailing and banding and all that
It's
stuff.
no different than a CD mastering.
Put it on like a big bin loop, right? Like an endless loop and then there would be multi machines that were blanks, right?
Yeah.
And then it would play. You could make it so you could do both sides at the same time, right? Because on a cassette, you have, side A is 2 tracks. There's 4 tracks on a cassette, left and right for side 1 and left and right for side 2. And side 2 is backwards compared to side 1. So in one pass, if you had a 4-track master tape feeding that, you could just run the tape one time, record all of it together. That's one way of doing it. The other one would be to do it in 2 directions, but not as common. I personally have never mastered a record for cassette. By the time I was mastering, it was CDs. So,
How much different of a? I mean, going back to it, it'd be the same mastering techniques for a cassette as a CD, as to some extent, right? Or is it going to be completely?
yeah.
Different?
The way that
Yeah.
you're trying to make it sound,
Right.
You're trying to make the record sound as good as you can make it sound, regardless of what the format's going to end up being. But there is that moment where you have to create the master that's going to be the replicator of all of the ones that people buy,
And that's one thing too. Cassettes didn't sound that great because I mean they were duplicated. And this is a good. Charlie White says his tapes are duplicated at high speed to basically get to the public, and that's the thing. I mean the quality, the sonic quality of a cassette tape wasn't the greatest. Come on, I don't believe it was.
No, but they got pretty good. They figured some things out. Number one, dubbing at high speed is actually good for it, because you're getting better fidelity at high speed. But when you play back a cassette, you're first of all, you're very, the width is real small. The tracks are very narrow, but what was really the problem is the slow play speed.
Yeah.
That's really what kills your fidelity, is having the tape move across the tape head slowly.
George, Rick V Spinner, which turntable do you use, George?
I have a P3, a heavily modified P3 with groove tracer subplatter and Delrin platter, and the speed box attached to it.
I forgot about this. Charlie White MoFi did HQ cassettes dubbed at real time from the master tape. Back
yeah, and when you got into Chrome tapes and you got into higher quality tape formulations and better versions of Dolby C and stuff like that, and everybody knows, well, maybe they don't, but Nakamichi at the end of the cassette run, Nakamichi sort of had like the Ferrari of cassette decks.
That's right. I'd see those in the hi-fi places I'd go to, just like, oh, one day maybe I'll have one of those, right? Because I showed everyone that was my Sony deck, or my Sony system that I had for years, and I mean I was content with that. Even back, I think that was a pretty good system I had when I was young, wasn't it? It's pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wanted those sort of modular,
Oh,
put together in a cabinet. They looked awesome. It looked fun to sit in front of, like a
I
real.
loved it. I remember the speakers are pretty crappy. I didn't remember it being very high fidelity. The
Yeah,
sonic quality wasn't there, that's for sure. But I remember too, like the first time I was able to record a vinyl record on a cassette. I thought that was the best thing. And then I would take that cassette and then record that for my friend as well, right? So it'd make dubs of it. It was fun.
yeah. I mean, man. There was tape trading amongst your friends. I mean, we had a method. We'd go down to the record store, 3 or 4 of us, pool our money,
Right.
choose as a group. We would, by committee, choose the records we were going to buy.
Yeah.
And then we would take all those records back to usually my house, because I had some pretty high-end Akai stuff.
Oh, nice.
And then we would dub the records on the cassettes, and then and then it would come down to, okay, who gets to keep the records? And I always tried to say, well, I should keep the records because I can make more copies when somebody loses theirs, And of course I ended up with not as many as I wanted, but I remember one day in particular, I remember getting Kill 'Em All and No Sleep Till Hammersmith by Motorhead.
Nice. Love it.
Metallica Kill 'Em All and No Sleep Till Hammersmith. And the thing was, Metallica's Kill 'Em All would not fit on a single side of a 90-minute tape. So 45 minutes, we had to put Metal Militia, the last song, on to the first song of side 2, and then start Motorhead, No Sleep Till Hammersmith. Luckily, there was enough room to fit both on there. But you had the last song of the Metallica album on the first side of side 2, on the first song of side 2.
What was that? The really good documentary when Lemmy was alive, that they did, I guess, just before he passed away, of just following him around, and he went into a record store in L.A. and that's when he bought I think he bought it on CD, but he bought the Beatles mono box, and he said, I don't know who he was with, if it was with his son at the time, at the record store, because you could only listen to the Beatles on mono, so he had to buy the Beatles mono box at the time. I thought that was really cool. And then he also said, what did he say to his son during that documentary? How his son's mom lost her virginity to John Lennon or something like that. It's like he's telling his own son that. I'm like, oh my god, good old Lemmy, huh?
Lemmy, man, he's a national treasure for 2 countries.
Amazing.
He ended up being Los Angeles's favorite guy at the end of the bar for quite a while.
Amazing. What a guy.
He even got an apartment, right around the corner.
Well, and they go to his apartment. So I again, Google it, guys. Lemmy documentary.
I think it's called like 99% MRF.
You need to watch this because they go into his apartment and it's full of crap too. I mean, he's definitely a hoarder. I mean, it was interesting to see a rock star's life and what he was doing at the time. He'd be at the bar with Billy Bob Thornton talking music. It's kind of cool to see all that in the documentary. I think I need to watch this again or rent it again or whatever, wherever I can get it on iTunes. Maybe.
He had his little video poker machine down at the end of the bar.
He did too, yeah. And I think they had rolls of quarters for him ready to go, right?
Yeah, and they have a big bronze statue of him outside now.
Which bar was that he
Rainbow.
was at? It was Rainbow. I've been to the Rainbow, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And literally, if Motorhead wasn't on tour, it was almost guaranteed you could go into the Rainbow and Lemmy.
So you imagine that back in the day, you're visiting Los Angeles and you go into the Rainbow for a beer. You and I go to the Rainbow for a beer, and there's Lemmy sitting playing VLT, or sitting there playing his, what was it? What game was it?
Video poker.
Video poker, and you could just go up to him, do selfies and talk to a legend. Amazing.
Absolutely.
I'm watching that documentary tonight.
I think I might too.
I need to watch it. A couple things. This Friday, you're back on the roundtable. We're doing our part 2 of this one here. Audiophile Roundtable, mind-blowing budget, audiophile quality picks part 2. Now, Patrick Peebethal texted me. I think you saw that text. He doesn't think budget's $50. So I don't know what he's bringing. So he's going to be bringing cheaper stuff than $50. But we were talking about the expensive records these days. I mean, really, a $50 record now. Again, see how I segue this, though? See this?
Yep.
Is a $60 record is only $9 instead of $74. So, Patrick, a $50 record is still considered budget in today's economy. See how I did that?
Yeah. I have a double K-Tel record in 1974, cost $7.99.
Do you know I was born and raised in Winnipeg? Guess where K-Tel
Winnipeg?
Winnipeg, Manitoba. So there was a hotel. It was I can't remember the name of it, the Gordon Hotel or Assiniboine Gordon Hotel, and it had the big K on the top of the hotel. So every time I'd go by as a kid, that was the K-Tel, and that was where the office was. And Phil Keeves, who ran it at the time, family business. And back in the, remember the internet age, when we had the internet boom with Pets.com, all these crazy companies. K-Tel stock absolutely went from like $1 stock to $50 stock during that time, because they got into a internet agreement with Playboy at the time, and they're going to do some sort of a internet thing with Playboy and start selling their records with Playboy. And so the stock went from like honestly literally pennies to like $50 in a matter of a week, and then it obviously reached the top. People were still buying at the top, and then the bottom fell out and the company's no longer around. But I mean, anyone in Canada, anyone living in Winnipeg, if you're watching, you all have K-Tel. Your parents had K-Tel records. I mean, that's when they were fitting, George. They would fit like 15, 16 songs on a side. So you see see the record. I mean, it was hilarious. There was absolutely no dead wax on these things. Nothing. It was like this much.
Yeah, and if you think about it, what a genius idea that somebody has. Just get the rights to the 50 top songs that are playing on the radio and put it on one record, and
it worked. Totally. And it worked. Yeah.
The equivalent would be what now? That's what I call music, right? That's a series, right, where they take the hits of a day and they still do it. They just call it something different.
Well, I remember buying, I don't know who put it out, but it would be Rock 81, Rock 82, Rock 83. It would be the hits of that year that I would buy the cassette for, and it was great. I think it was I think that's what it was called. I can't remember who would have put that together, but of course it was a cassette. Yeah,
I think somewhere in a box I have a Time Life one that's got all the top 10 hits from like 1957 to 1977 or something. It's like this big volume. I have it in a box somewhere. I'll pull that out for a show one time.
Yeah, we should do that. So I'll see you Friday. Big stuff coming up. We've got, like I said, Abby Fong from Impex and her team will be on the show to discuss her latest one step, the Getz and Gilberto, which now I'm looking at it too, and I was reading it before I get on. I might have to get this at record. I mean, I don't know. I think I'm FOMOing myself here is what I'm doing at this point.
Yeah, that's, and now that I just talked about not wanting any of those 75th anniversary.
Where is it here? It's here somewhere. I'll show everyone. Here it is. I think I'm full. It's $129.98 US. Okay, all right. 45 RPM, super vinyl, Bernie Grundman. I don't know. I'm creating my own FOMO here.
Yeah, I did. I think I did it to myself too.
And again, if you haven't already, Rhino High-Fidelity, Marquee Moon, 300, just under 300 left of the 5,000, I've been told by my friends at Rhino. So if you haven't gotten one already, I'm not trying to promote FOMO, but it was a freaking good album. It really was.
That's what I've heard.
Got to get one. 300 left, George.
I have one.
All right.
Not that one.
See you on Friday. Thanks, everyone. And then hit that thumbs up button. I don't see a thumbs up. Let's go. Can you do it? Can you do it on yours? I don't know if I can do it on mine. Let's get it. That'd be a thumbs up. The algorithm uses this thumbs up, and that's one other thing. I was looking at the stats for our show, and that we get a lot of people watching the show, but half of the viewers aren't even subscribed to the channel. Makes no sense. So
come on, folks, hit that thumbs up.
Hit that thumbs up. Subscribe. Got to do that. It really helps us out. It gets us better guests and everything, and we can have some fun. It gets us goodies to give away as well. I don't know if everyone realizes that, but that's another thing. But yeah, do that. Subscribe. Got to do that. Hit the thumbs up. Subscribe. All right. I'll see you Friday. Awesome show. Bye-bye. Bye.